Good morning, and welcome to the Postal Regulatory Commission's first off-the-record public technical conference and docket number N2021-2, in which the Commission will issue an advisory opinion on the Postal Service's proposed nationwide changes in service standards for first-class package service. Thank you for joining us and for your participation in this proceeding. I'm Ann O'Connor, and also with me is Lauren D'Agostino, and both of us are with the Commission's Office of General Counsel. We have a few housekeeping matters to attend to before introducing the witnesses and giving participants who registered a chance to engage with the witnesses. On the technical front, we have several reminders and some instruction. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. If you have joined us using WebEx, please do not have the live stream playing in the background at the same time as running the WebEx application. You will be able to access the stream after the conference is over. We ask for your patience as we work through this technical conference in a virtual environment. There may be brief delays as we sort out technology or coordination issues. Thank you for your understanding. If you are having technical difficulties, please refer to the troubleshooting guide emailed to you with a meeting invitation. And if you are still having issues, please reach out to support@prc.gov. All participants are currently muted, and only the meeting host will be able to unmute you when called upon to engage with a witness. We'll be moving through each of the Postal Service's witnesses in order, and we'll call upon each participant registered to speak with that witness. For each witness, we will announce the names of participants that have indicated through registration that they would like the opportunity to question that witness. The list will be announced in the order the participants will be called upon. Prior to being called upon, one of the hosts will announce that you're next in the queue. The host will introduce you and unmute you to have the opportunity to question that witness. Please remain unmuted until you finish your line of questioning with that witness. If you mute yourself, you will have to reach out to Q&A again to regain speaking privileges. When you finish your questioning, please say that you have nothing further for this witness so the host will move on to the next participant in the queue. The chat function is disabled, and only the host will see the questions or messages typed by participants into the Q&A. If you have a message for the host, such as a request to follow up on a specific point, please message the host using the Q&A, and we will do our best to accommodate you. The Q&A feature can be accessed by pressing the blue button marked Q&A in the bottom right of your meeting window. In the Ask box, please select All Co-hosts to type your request to question the witness. Lauren and I will monitor the Q&A, and we will also have additional support in the meeting should there be a significant number of participants using that feature. You may receive a written response deferring your question to indicate that you've been added to the queue. Before we conclude with each witness, we'll remind participants of a last call to request follow-up questions of that particular witness. That's it for the technical side of things. Lauren has a few procedural issues before we begin. After Lauren concludes, we will begin questioning the first Postal Service witness, Mr. Steve Hagenstein, and the first questioner will be Philip Tabata. Lauren?
Thank you, Anne. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being with us. For those of you who have not participated in a commission proceeding before, or if it has been a while since your last participation, I have a few brief reminders about the nature of this case and the nature of this technical conference. For those of you who wish to participate formally in the case, that is, to become a party, issue discovery, prepare briefs and reply briefs, and potentially offer a rebuttal case, you must formally intervene. There is information on participation and intervention available on the Commission's website under the How to Participate tab. For those that wish to let their views be known on the record but do not wish to formally intervene, you may file a statement of position, which is due no later than August 9, 2021. Information on filing a statement of position or other material is available in the notice and order that established the procedures for this case, which is order number 5920, issued on Monday, June 29, 2021. Today's technical conference is an opportunity to question the witnesses to gain a better understanding of the Postal Service's proposal and how that proposal may or may not comport with the policies of Title 39. It is not an opportunity, such as a statement of position, briefing, or rebuttal on the case, to make arguments as to what participants think about the case. To that end, if a participant is not asking questions, a host will remind the participant to please ask questions. If after such a reminder the participant continues to make statements rather than question the witness, a host will mute the participant and move to the next participant in the queue. Likewise, participants are reminded to maintain professionalism and decorum during this conference. This technical conference is off the record. That means that while it is recorded and streamed for transparency and accessibility, nothing said in this conference constitutes record evidence in this case. This technical conference will not be transcribed, nor may any party cite to this conference in a brief, motion, or argument. Nor will there be any compelling of answers or resolution of disagreements among the parties during this conference. All participants are encouraged to engage as fully as practicable, but to please avoid repetition or unnecessary objection or argument. Given that this technical conference is to facilitate the Commission's consideration of the policy impact of the Postal Service's proposed service changes, the Postal Service is encouraged to engage on policy questions that may, in other proceedings with a narrower scope, be beyond what the Postal Service would engage with during a technical conference. During this conference, the Postal Service may indicate that it is able to provide further information in response to specific questions or engagement. The party seeking such information will need to separately file a formal discovery request for that information to be docketed and available to be designated as evidence in the record. The Postal Service's witnesses available today, in the order in which they will appear, are: number 1, with the designation of USPS-T-1, Mr. Stephen Hagenstein, on the proposed service changes, their benefits, as well as how the proposed changes would affect current mail volume. Number 2, USPS-T-2, Ms. Michelle Kim, on the overall impact of the proposed changes on the Postal Service's financial situation and the projected transportation cost savings related to this proposal. Number 3, USPS-T-3, Mr. Thomas Foti, on trends in the lightweight package market, how the proposed changes may impact customer satisfaction, as well as the market research conducted to estimate the potential volume and contribution impact of the proposed changes. And finally, the fourth witness is Ms. Sharon Owens. She will provide information that is not provided by other witnesses, serving as the Postal Service's institutional witness. The Postal Service has indicated that it has no formal presentation today, and we will jump straight to questioning of the individual witnesses. The Postal Service witnesses will be able to share their screens or applications to show their public testimony and public workbooks or modeling, if such sharing will facilitate the discussion. The witnesses may make some introductory remarks if they choose. And without further ado, Anne will introduce the first witness, Mr. Steve Hagenstein, and the first 3 participants who wish to question him. Back to you, Anne.
The first Postal Service witness for questioning will be Mr. Stephen Hagenstein on the proposed service standard changes and their benefits, as well as how the proposed service changes would affect current mail volume in the contiguous United States. The first 3 participants in the queue to question witness Hagenstein are Philip Tabita, Samuel Karoma, and Mallory Smith. Witness Hagenstein will have the ability to display his public testimony in Excel spreadsheets filed in this case. Witness Hagenstein has support personnel on the line who will have the ability to unmute themselves as well. Witness Hagenstein, do you have any introductory remarks before we unmute the first questioner, Philip Tabita?
No, good morning. I'm ready to go as soon as the first questioner is.
Thank you. As a reminder to each questioner, please let us know when you're finished with your line of questioning of witness Hagenstein so we can move to the next person in the queue. And now, Philip Tabita, you are unmuted and will have the floor to question witness Hagenstein.
Good morning, Mr. Hagenstein. It's Phil Tabita with the American Postal Workers Union. On the 3-digit pair file, it probably is somewhere in the record, but I didn't see it. The volume numbers are daily, average daily volume numbers. Is that correct?
That's correct. We took the between each one of the pairs, we estimated the it would be approximately the second highest Wednesday of October of 2020.
Thank you. In terms of transportation, I am assuming that first-class packages are sharing transportation with all kinds of other mail products. Are you able to describe briefly how the routing is different than the routing for other mail products?
The routings, the way that the network was modeled, it's looking at the constraints from the origin and destination. So what time is the volume available at the origin? What time does the volume have to be delivered, which is no later than 2000 at the destination? And then any products that also could be routed on that same transportation would be allowed to route on that same transportation. So it's a matter of capability.
Those are all the questions I have.
Okay, thank you, Phil.
Thank you. The next questioner is Samuel Karoma. Mr. Karoma, you have the floor to unmute yourself.
Good morning, Mr. Higginson. Mr. Higginson, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Good morning, Samuel.
The expected shift and volume from first-class mail in the first N case and the expected shift and volume from air to surface in this case, will the underutilized capacity be in surface transportation be sufficient enough to accommodate those shifts? Also, taking into consideration your anticipated 75% container utilization and the expected increase in first-class packages, will that volume or underutilized capacity be enough to accommodate all those shifts from air to surface?
Thanks for your question, Mr. Karoma. The current utilization opportunity on our network today, it won't absorb any shifts from air to surface for all lanes. There's sufficient or a great opportunity to shift some of that volume on the available capacity, but some transportation will need to be added to accommodate the air to surface. And we did a cost evaluation to determine whether or not, based on the modeled volumes and assumed costs in the model, whether or not it would be cost effective to shift from air to surface. So that was one of your questions, I believe. Could you repeat your other questions?
The expected increase in first-class packages, because these are all shifts that are coming into the surface transportation network.
Yeah, that was a bit of an unknown when we were doing the modeling. So we were monitoring the volume trends of packages for last year, and due to the dramatic increase in packages that we saw from the COVID pandemic, we monitored the volume trends, and it appeared to us that it plateaued around the October timeframe, and so we used the October timeframe to estimate what we projected the volumes to be moving forward. So of course, as volume continues to grow, certain lanes will need to continue to be evaluated just as they are today to add transportation where needed. Or if there are certain cases where volume is declining and we want to shift transportation, we would have to shift those as well. So this is taking a snapshot in time of where we would project volumes to be based on where we were monitoring volume trends, and then what would the transportation network, what the opportunity would be based on those volumes.
No further question for this witness now.
Thank you, Mr. Karoma.
Thank you, Mr. Higginson.
Thank you. The next questioner is Mallory Smith. Ms. Smith, please unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Mallory Smith. I'll be the PR in this case. Thank you, Mr. Higgins' team, for being here today. I actually do not have any questions for the witness at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Smith. We'll now turn to our next questioner, and that will be on the behalf of commission staff. Our next three questioners in the queue, just to give some lead time, will be JP Klingenberg, Jana Slovinska, and Nina Ye. And with that, I'll turn it over to JP Klingenberg for questioning.
Morning. Thank you as always, Mr. Hagenstein, for being with us. I would like you to discuss, if you could, the difference in operational flows between parcels and letters and flats, and how this proposal.
I'm sorry, I'm having a very difficult time hearing you.
Sorry, having a hard time hearing me. Okay. Are you hearing me any better now?
I can hear you. It's still a little difficult, but I can hear you. I'll do my best.
Okay. Can you discuss the consolidation or changes to the operational flows between letters, parcels, and flats due to or part of this proposal?
The consolidation of flows of letters and flats and packages as a result of this proposal?
Yeah, basically the idea I'm getting at is whether currently parcels are treated very differently operationally than letters and flats, and whether some of that is going to change because of this proposal.
Oh. Okay, thanks for clarifying. No, we're not. Again, with this proposal, similarly to the mail proposal, we're not proposing any operational changes directly as a result of this proposal here. So this would allow, just again, similar fashion as the last case that we presented out with the mail. This would open up additional routing opportunities and opportunities for us to improve our service performance between our pairs, and as well as gain some operational efficiencies or transportation efficiencies for the packages.
So are dispatch times for parcels currently aligned with dispatch times for letters and flats?
To the extent possible, they are. This would give us greater opportunity where, for instance, if we have late clearance issues due to capacity constraints at an origin due to packages and the increase in package volume that we've had, this would give us additional opportunity or additional flexibility to move those dispatch times a little bit later to accommodate those later clearance times at the origins.
I'm curious how complex the process is of aligning clearance times across locations. Basically, if you need parcels to be done by 4 a.m. and you also need letters to be done by 4 a.m. because in your testimony, you talk about having a 4 a.m. target for some of the parcels, to allow for the 3-day or 4-day service standard. Is it the situation where you need to go in and set a target clearance time for every shape at every location based on an OD pair?
It wouldn't necessarily be by O&D pair. It would be based on, in certain cases, there may need to be, there's always some exceptions, but for the most part, what we would try to do is set the earliest dispatch times after the achievable clearance time for mail processing. So we would not want to set dispatch times earlier than when they're actually clearing volumes.
So functionally, does that mean you're setting thousands of new dispatch times as a part of this, as a result of these changes or this proposal?
No, not necessarily. I think a lot of our dispatch times right now are the plants are capable of hitting those dispatch times. There's definitely some opportunity for some of the earlier dispatch times that this would open up opportunity to shift some of those later and avoid some of the extra trips that we have to call today, or holding some of the trips and causing some of those late dispatches that we have out of our origins.
Are first class packages the final packages run through mail processing equipment on a given day, or is it priority mail that goes last, or is it priority mail express that goes last, or is it like bundles of flats that go last, or is that something that is different at every location?
It varies based on capability, so processing capability. In origin, for instance, if they have limited package processing capability, that particular origin will prioritize outgoing priority first, and then they will then process outgoing first class package services around that priority processing window, so that we are giving priority to the priority products. Bundles, outgoing bundles, those tend to be processed earlier on in the operating window.
Would the changes to the first class package service standard mean that they could no longer be processed with priority mail?
Our intent is to, it always has been to process those separately. So in certain cases, based on capacity constraints and limitations of the processing, in certain cases, those products are merged. Where some commercial products are entered, we don't have good separations of the different product types. Those are processed together as well. So what we've been trying to do is separate those with an out-of-class bin and then process those separately, so that we're not inadvertently upgrading first-class package services at the detriment of priority.
Do you have data on how often that happens? Can you tell me how disaggregated you would have available data on that topic?
Do we have data on, I'm sorry, on what?
On basically identifying maybe by facility or by day how often priority and FCPS are processed together, and like what percentage of volume, you know, any kind, like I just don't know what data is available there, so I'm curious if you could outline what you're looking at when you look at it.
Yeah, we have some data that helps us identify where volumes are being mixed and to what extent.
Okay, that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
The next two questioners in the queue for witness Hagenstein are Yana Slavinsky and Nina Ye, both on behalf of the commission staff. If anyone else would like to be added to the queue, please do reach out via the Q&A box for witness Hagenstein. Ms. Slavinska?
Thank you, Lauren. I would like to know if the routings that the model created with both first-class mail and first-class package service new standards, are they different than the routings that were created with only first-class mail?
Well, so are the routings different for first-class packages and first-class mail?
The network.
They can be. They can be different. So where we have facilities that only process mail, as far as letters and flats, the routing for those would be different than where the routings for the packages, which may be processed in another facility. As far, I answered a earlier question as far as could the products be merged together, and absolutely, we want to merge to the extent possible and take advantage of the utilization on our transportation where feasible. So we allow the different products to be merged together on the transportation.
So would you say that when packages and mail are processed at the same facilities, then first-class mail routings from first-class mail model were kept, and any new routings would be for volume that cannot be processed at the same facility? The difference in mileage is only due to not being able to put packages on routings from first-class mail model.
The difference in mileage would be based on the opportunity to shift additional volumes from air to surface based on this proposal, and the different modeling constraints that were used for this model. So that would change the mileage, is based on saying we have this pair that was previously an air pair, is currently transported by air, and now we've introduced a new a greater transportation window, and then if the model deemed it more cost effective to route that volume on surface transportation, that would influence the mileage. results from this model.
Okay. Okay, I see that inter-area mileages are projected to increase. These are long-distance trips. As a result of that, you'd be adding trips, long-distance trips. Did model allow even more first-class mail volume to divert from air?
It did, yes. So as we build, so if we think about when I talked about the cost effectiveness of routing or changing mode from air to surface, that's dependent on the basically the cost of flying that versus putting in a surface trip. So with the prior business case or the prior proposal of shifting the first class mail service standards for letters and flats only, we have cube or weight associated with that volume to compare routing versus air versus surface. Now that we introduce the packages, that will allow the cost effect or create more cost-effective surface lanes, since we're introducing additional volume that would be pulling out of the air and being able to route, be able to be routed on the same transportation lanes.
So the cost effectiveness was determined based for volume of first class mail and FCPS together.
I'm sorry, could you please repeat that?
Right, so the first class mail model only considered the cost of transporting first class mail volume by air versus surface. In this case, it would consider cost of first class mail and FCPS transported by air versus surface at the same time.
That is correct. Yes,
okay.
That is correct.
And it opened extra opportunities. Okay. Thank you. I wanted to see, I see that the modeling used 6 consecutive days of volume. Is that different from how first class mail model generated routings and considered pairings of volumes?
It was a slight change from how we modeled the first class mail only when we modeled that, yes. So I think this modeling this way opens up additional opportunities for pairing over the different days.
Uh-huh. But the pairing allowed pairing with first class mail as well.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, but the volume was average Wednesday volume times 6 rather than Monday through Saturday of that week in March. That's
correct. We were looking for, again, more or less trying to identify a static state in the network and what would that transportation look like for one particular day, but allowing those pairings to happen over multiple days.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I would like to ask about cost to make sure I understand. So the air network savings, they are projected to be 311 million. That includes first class mail and FCPS volume or weight, right?
That would include, yes, both first class mail and first class packages.
Yes. In surface network, we're expecting 60 million less savings by introducing FCPS standards, new standards, right? The savings would be decreased by about 60 million. In the surface
I don't have those figures in front of me. I believe Michelle, witness Michelle Kim, would be more appropriate to answer those.
Okay, I can ask her. My next question would be about assumptions. So we know first class mail volume did not have as much opportunity as FCPS to be routed through transfer centers. because the critical entry time was earlier and it was more restrictive service standards. So the STC operations will have increased demands from new first-class mail volumes and from the shifted FCPS volumes to surface network. Did you maybe increase those transfer times for STC transfers in the model, in this model?
No, we did not. We did not increase the time. We still accounted for the 2-hour transfer time, which is what time that our contracted STCs are allotted, and it's more or less what we plan on for all the STCs as far as transfer time. So that's enough time for them to work any working containers or dock transfer to make any downstream connections.
So it's 2 hours for all sites. It is not
Correct.
determined on OD pair basis.
No, it would be eligible or ineligible based on the time that it can arrive at that STC and the departure time from that STC.
Mm-hmm. And volumes will be transferring through both contracted STCs and postal operated STCs, right?
That's correct. All of our STCs as they are today were essentially treated the same in the model.
And would you say that postal STCs, postal operated STCs have may take longer than 2 hours than contracted STCs? Is there extra requirements on those? Do they process volume that they gather from origin sites for transportation in the network? Do they have increased demands from that contracted STCs don't have?
For the modeling purposes, we treated them the same in current state today. Where there's difficulty making transfers in the allotted time, there may be some exceptions. But again, for our transportation planning, even in our current network, with all the STCs, we still require 2 hours for that transfer.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Maybe I would like to ask about weight as well, since the network costs have increased in the past few years, partly due to the increase in package volume and weight. Was weight included when costs were calculated? When the cost effectiveness was being determined, for example?
We did include, so we worked with the cost allocation group to identify the weights and cube conversions to estimate the cost effectiveness or the potential cost savings of pulling that out of the air network versus the cost of putting a surface transportation lane in place. So we looked at the market share distribution of our different carriers and the cost per weight or cost per cube of those carriers.
Okay, thank you. So my last question is about the baseline network. The analysis started with the same baseline as what we have it in first class mail model, right?
Just I believe you're asking if both models use the same baseline?
Yes.
Yes, both models use the same baseline.
Yes, thank you. And same baseline costs, FY20. Yeah.
Again, for the cost comparison, you'll want to direct those questions to Kim.
Okay. Well, for the baseline network, though, I wanted to see it's when I look at the distribution of mileages in the network, It appears 1% of mileage is short distance trips inter-PNDC, and inter-area are about 78% of mileages. Does that, when I compare the reason I brought up cost, when I compare it to baseline costs, inter-PNDC is about 12% of cost, and I wonder whether you could explain to me why only 1% of mileages and 12% of costs are inter-PNDC trips more expensive, or is there a reason?
I don't. Do you have something maybe you could share on your screen to help me better understand what you're looking at and try to answer your question?
I don't know if I can share my screen, but the SSD 5D volume impacts Connor's file, the library reference. It only has one table, and if you look at those mileages, inter-PNDC only take 1%, account for 1%. And I wanted to see if that reflects the actual network. Is there really only 1% of inter-PNDC trips mileages?
So, yeah, I can't answer that question specifically. I mean, this is based on our model, the transportation requirements that were output in the baseline model. And what that is, that's just plant to plant within the same district. So there are very limited plants that are within that same district, and also the way that we modeled, we have a volume that's aggregated at an aggregation point. So if we have multiple plants, let's say in a district, and let's say there's 2 small plants and then a larger plant, what we try to do is look for opportunities where those smaller plant volumes can be aggregated into that larger facility. And that mileage may not be included in that inter-PNDC in the model output for the baseline.
Okay.
So we include the feeder to aggregate mileage, but it may not be categorized as inter-PNDC. I'd have to go back in and verify that, which I don't have that information right now.
Okay, thank you very much. And so you would say that introducing new service standards for FCPS has even further reduced inefficient trips, point-to-point, low utilization trips.
It does, yes. So adding additional transportation window between the pairs will allow us to combine, again, similar to the prior proposal for the mail only. It adds opportunity for additional pairings, additional combination of volumes, additional utilization of the STCs.
And would you know how much of FCPS volume was possible to place on those routings from first iteration? We were able to do it for about 30% of volume, if I remember from the FCM model.
Were we able to? I'm sorry. Could you repeat that question?
In first class mail model, the routings were able to absorb about 30% of air volume. Is that percentage higher here in this model, or do you know, lower or same? Would you?
Yeah. So the percentage, I believe you're asked. Are you talking about the percentage of volume that we would anticipate shifting from air to surface?
That too, but also how much of it was possible to place on existing routings versus creating new routings for the shifted, because these are long distance volumes. I'm trying to see.
Okay. Okay, I understand. Yeah, that's difficult for us to determine based on the model, because the model is not, it's basically the baseline is modeling underneath our current constraints, and then allowing the model to route those volumes between all the pairs underneath our current constraints. So it doesn't necessarily, the routings that the model generates are not necessarily, won't necessarily match up exactly with what we have today. So it's difficult to say how much of that volume could shift and be absorbed by our current network without looking at each individual lane in our current network. As far as the volume that we would anticipate shifting from air to surface, it's approximately 30% of the volume would shift.
Okay, I believe these are all of my questions. Thank you for your time and for your answers.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hagenstein and Ms. Slavinska. We will now unmute the final person who's registered to question witness Hagenstein, Nina Ye, on behalf of the commission staff. Ms. Ye.
Good morning, Mr. Hagenstein. My first question, will you please refer to your testimony, purpose of testimony, page 3, note 2 at the bottom? And if you could please elaborate regarding what effects this proposal would have on inbound international mail service standards for small packets and bulky letters?
Sorry, you said page 3 of the testimony?
Page 3 of your purpose of testimony, bottom note 2.
Purpose of testimony. I don't have that document handy to reference right now. Would you mind reading that to me, and then I can answer your
Sure.
question?
Sure. The note says that changes to first-class package service standards would also incidentally affect international mail service standards for small packets and bulky letters, and that first-class package service standards generally apply to inbound international small packets and bulky letters from domestic origin airports to delivery points, and for outbound international mail from origin to ISCs, International Service Centers. Now, you do further add that Postal Service is not proposing any service standard changes regarding packages or changes to caller service through this proceeding, nor are we proposing pricing changes for any products here. So my question is, if you could just help us understand what sort of impacts do you think will have on international mail service standards for small packets and bulky letters, inbound and outbound, if you wish?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, the impact would be based on the servicing ISC and the origin or destination distance between the servicing ISC and that origin or destination. So if it currently is, let's just say it's a 3-day service standard from an origin to that ISC, and then that changes to a 5-day service standard based on that distance, we would, the impact to that international volume between that pair, that origin or destination, would also increment up by 2 days. So the way that the international volume, the service standards are based on however much time it takes to get to and from that ISC from the international sites to the international service center, and then it adopts the domestic service standards from that point on. And then conversely, from an origin to the ISC outbound, it adopts the domestic service standard between those 2 points. So where we would see that service standard change between that origin or destination and that ISC, we would also expect that same incremental change to the international products as well.
And do you know approximately what percentage of international inbound, outbound pieces will be affected by the service change?
Yes, I do. I don't believe that's something that we had on our public impact, though.
Oh, if it's not public, then we can move on to the next question.
Yeah, we did evaluate or estimate our anticipated impact.
And was that filed in a non-public library reference? Is that something you can refer me to, or it wasn't filed?
If you want to give me 1 second here, I believe that was filed. Let me just confirm.
Mr. Hagenstein, if you would prefer, I'd be happy to ask that question in a discovery so that we can move on. And
Yeah, let's go that route, please. Thank you.
no problem.
Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Yep.
It's Dennis Southard for the Postal Service. Mr. Hagenstein, are you looking for what's marked in the non-public library references as 11_ Summary?
Yeah, that would be it.
Yeah, and that was filed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis.
And moving along by the same vein, are there other products that would be affected by this proposal other than the ones we just discussed?
No, I mean anything that would fall underneath the category of first class package services would be impacted.
So nothing incidentally would be impacted other than the international pieces. Okay.
No, we're not anticipating anything else.
Okay. And just to confirm, would competitive domestic negotiated service agreements that include FCPS products in the contract, would these be impacted by the new service changes standard?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
Sure. Would competitive domestic NSAs, negotiated service agreements that include first class package service products in their contract, would those pieces be impacted by this proposal?
They could be, yes. So if they're being inducted, if it's an origin product, it's going to be following our network. We can't have isolated service standard between pairs from an origin to destination based on an NSA. So yes, they would potentially be impacted as well.
My next question, how would you please compare and contrast the process that was used to develop the service standards, the initial service standards, excuse me, for first class package service with the process used to determine the proposed service standards?
I don't, so the original service standards versus what this proposal, I think the original service standards were based on the package service. All first class mail had the same service standards, so it was based on the critical entry time of 8 o'clock. That distance basically for the 2-day volumes from origin to destination. So dispatching by 2 o'clock in the morning, as early as 2 o'clock in the morning, and arriving no later than 8 o'clock in the morning. That's how the original service standards were based for first class mail. That was going back to I think the 2012 operating window change, service standard changes. This one we looked at different iterations and feedback from leadership as far as what we want to do. Looking for additional transit window to improve our service performance. Looking at opportunities to shift to a cheaper mode of transportation, and then also extending our reach for the 2-day volume for packages was also included. So it was a feedback. We did some initial modeling iteration, looked at the comparison between what we would anticipate as far as the mileage impact between sticking with the 6-hour range for 2-day packages versus an 8-hour range, the extended 8-hour range.
Great, thank you. I understand you don't have your testimony in front of you, so a couple of my questions.
I do have my testimony in front of me. I
Okay,
didn't have,
great.
I think that document that you had mentioned in front of me, but I do have my testimony.
Great, thank you. So my next question is in regards to page 2 of your testimony at the bottom, where you discuss that current average utilization of surface transportation capacity is approximately 42%. Does that 42% reflect only first class package service that is on the surface transportation, or all overall?
That's overall network plant to plant transportation.
And so that means that 42% could include other surface products, just to confirm. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. Everything that's currently going plant to plant on our surface network.
And this could be a more convoluted question, but is there any reason on the top of your mind that causes it to be underutilized?
Yes, it's basically the service standard constraint. So having to depart at a particular time and having to arrive at destination no later than the critical entry time really restricts what we can put on that transportation. It limits the ability to transfer through hubs, to aggregate volumes, and add efficient multi-stop transportation routings.
Okay. And on the next page, page 3, on the top, you state that through improved surface transportation capacity utilization and consolidation, we expect to require fewer surface transportation trips over a given period than we currently require. Now, can these improvements be achieved without the proposal? Or could any
if
portion
we move forward with the first class mail letters and flats, there would be some opportunity for consolidation. This would add on top of that opportunity. I am sure as we look to our network, we have a team of people that look for opportunities to eliminate trips, consolidate redundant lanes, and improve our utilization. So that's an effort. We have that constantly underway right now. So there is some opportunity for that, but not to the extent that this proposal would open up.
I see. And I'm not sure if this is a question for witness Kim or not, but was there an analysis done where you compare the cost savings without the proposal, but proceeding with these sort of network optimization and versus with the proposal, just to measure what are we gaining even without the proposed service standard changes?
Yeah, so our baseline modeling that's used as a comparison in showing this opportunity, that's an optimized network based on our current service standard constraints. And the mileage for our baseline model is very similar, very close to our current baseline mileage on our existing network. So we feel that based on that, there's not a lot of opportunity. I mean, there is opportunity, and we're currently pursuing that. And but again, not to the extent that this service standard change proposal opens up.
Thank you. If you can refer to page 4 of your testimony, where you state that an estimated 14 to 48% reduction in the number of air charters may be possible depending on the final volume of the lanes identified to shift from air to surface. Would you please help me understand the term lanes in here? Like,
sure. A lane would be an origin to destination pair.
Okay. And so what is the process of determining whether to utilize the air charters in transporting a product?
So we use air charters where our current air network can't support the volumes. So those tend to typically be in our heavier origins where we just don't have enough airlift capacity, and then we need to augment our airlift with additional charters to move that volume. Those same origins would or should have enough volume to justify shifting more volume from air to surface based on having higher volume density between those air pairs. So based on that, we would expect a reduction in those charters out of those higher volume origins.
Right. And I recall, I don't have the exact location, but I recall you discussing how because of the pandemic, the use of air charter utilization had to be increased. But at the same time, you foresee that even without the pandemic, or even post-pandemic period, with the increase of FCPS packages, the same demand of air charters would continue. Is that correct? Meaning the pandemic really perhaps didn't have as big of an impact in the increase in demand for air charters, or do you see the growth of FCPS being the driver?
It's a combination. Initially during the pandemic, when we lost a lot of our commercial carrier lift, that increased significantly the demand for charters. As the commercial air carriers are coming back online and we're increasing that capacity, our demand for those charters has lessened, but we still need to run charters.
Will you please refer to page 11 with where you have a diagram?
Yes.
Okay. I'm trying to understand the diagram. Now you mentioned a parent ADC. I'm going to attempt to ask my question here because I may have to save it for the discovery process, but can you elaborate the existing situation in which the SCF is closer to the origin facility and has a 2-day service standard, while the parent ADC is beyond the 6-hour drive time, therefore has a 3-day service standard? It seems that based on your testimony, the Postal Service in those circumstances would just route the piece to the closer facility. But then you mentioned that it would cause the service commitment, well, it's rerouted to meet the service commitments to the subordinate SCF. So I don't quite follow that. I mean, because if it's under a 3-day standard, why doesn't it just still be considered meeting the service standard, since it's legitimately under the parent ADC and it's supposed to be 3 days?
Yeah, it is a little confusing. So I'll try to explain this the best way I can. So this would be what I was trying to highlight are certain instances where we have an origin to destination SCF that would be a 2-day pair, but the parent ADC, the larger facility that services that SCF, that small facility, may be farther away when would actually be 3-day service standard. So where we would want to route volumes from that origin to that ADC, where we have the larger volumes, and include that small SCF in with that routing, we can't do that, because when we would route that based on a 3-day service standard, and then by the time we transfer from that ADC to that intermediate SCF between the origin and that ADC, that would be a 2-day pair and it wouldn't meet the critical entry times. So what that forces us to do in certain cases is put in direct transportation from an origin to that little SCF for hardly any volume at all. And that's an instance of what drives some of our low utilization between some of our pairs. So in those cases, we try to limit that cost impact by contracting smaller trucks to accommodate that volumes. But it often requires our processing centers at the origin to have separate processes to hold out those volumes and then route those volumes specifically to those small SCFs. Now, this isn't widespread across the country, but we wanted to, as we developed this proposal, we were assuming that if we didn't base the service standards on those transfers between the larger facilities to the downstream SCFs, we would create several more of those instances, since we're now expanding from a 3-day service standard to a 4-day and a 5-day. So we wanted to make sure we incorporated that transfer time and give us the best opportunity to route as efficiently as possible.
I see. So in your diagram, could you identify, are any of these facilities considered a parent ADC, or is that just not even on the?
Yeah, so SCFB would be that parent ADC. So see where it says facility B is an ADC and a double ADC?
Mm-hmm.
So they are responsible for package processing and letter processing for SCFC and SCFB, whereas SCFC is responsible only for their letters. So if we flip-flop those SCFC and SCFB, and we said, okay, letters had a 2-day service standard, but going to SCFC, but SCFB was a 3-day, that would maybe better describe the situation we were just talking about, where we would want to route the volume to that larger facility that processes all products, but now we would be forced to route directly to that small SCF that maybe only processes letters, but we have to route only letters to that facility in order to meet that service standard and critical entry time for that volume.
I see. Okay, and
it's confusing. Yeah, I hope I did a better.
I may have to revisit this question in Discovery, but do you happen to know how much FCPS volume is impacted by in this type of situation?
I'm sorry, did you say DPS volume?
No, first class package service volume. How much of it is this like a significant issue, or it sounds like it's not as big of an issue for the Postal Service?
Oh, current state right now, it's not as much of an issue with the first class packages as it is with the, because we have the later critical entry times for the first class packages, but it is more so an issue with the first class mail. But as we're looking at this proposal, it builds on that mail case. So we still wanted to incorporate that and explain why we're changing it from just an origin PNDC, basing the service standards based on the origin PNDC travel time to the destination SCF. We want to include that interim ADC in that transit time calculation.
That is all from me. Thank you very much for answering my questions today.
Excuse me, before we
You're
proceed,
welcome.
it's Dennis Southard again. I just want to make a correction. The international summary spreadsheet that we were discussing earlier was in fact not part of the library reference.
And could it be filed, or we can go through a formal process of requesting it then? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ye, and thank you, Mr. Southard, for clarifying that for us. That is the final registrant on the list for witness Hagenstein. We'll give a moment to see if anyone else would like to be added. If you do, please reach out via the Q&A box in the bottom right of your meeting window. To give some advance warning, we will shortly be moving on to our next witness, who is Michelle Kim. The two registrants on the queue for Ms. Kim are Samuel Karoma, who is asking questions on behalf of the public representative in this case, and again, Nina Ye on behalf of commission staff. Hearing no further questions for Mr. Hagenstein at this time, I'd like to thank him for his participation in this event. We'll move on to witness Kim. Witness Kim, you should be able to unmute.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning, ma'am. Witness Kim is testifying on the topic of the overall impact of the proposed changes on the Postal Service's financial situation and the projected transportation cost savings related to this proposal. The first questioner for Ms. Kim in this technical conference is Samuel Karoma on behalf of the public representative. Mr. Karoma, would you kindly unmute?
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. I have no question for this witness at this time.
Great, thank you. In that case, we will turn it back to Nina Ye on behalf of the commission staff. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, with Ms. Kim. My first question to you, will you please refer to page 1 of your testimony, USPS-T-2?
Yes, I have it.
Based on your testimony, can you confirm that essentially all the reduction in required air capacity and reduction in required capacity within intercluster and inter-PNDC contracts will be absorbed by the inter-area contracts?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think they're separate categories for the inter-area versus inter-cluster and inter-PNDC. Those are separate trips.
I see. So if there is a reduction in air capacity, those pieces would be put in some kind of surface, right? But then from what I'm reading, there's also a reduction in inter-cluster and inter-PNDC contracts. So those are surface. So then you're saying it's not necessarily the case that inter-area contracts will be increased?
I see. So you're asking about the reduction in air and what surface category would be absorbing those?
Correct. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, then yes, I would agree that inter-area would probably be absorbing the majority of that.
Okay, and similarly, the reduction in inter-cluster and inter-PNDC contracts are also being absorbed by inter-area contracts.
I wouldn't necessarily say that. So I think Witness Hagenstein might be more equipped to answer this, but my understanding is that perhaps in the intercluster and inter-PNDC, those reductions could be more a result of the optimization opportunities in the surface network and being able to route through STCs and things like that.
Okay, got it. Okay. And on page 2 of your testimony, will you please explain the basis for calculating the cost savings based on changes in capacity for both the FC first class mail and first class package services combined rather than just for first class package services on its own?
Sure. So that was how the Witness Hagenstein's model was run. And I believe when first class mail and first class packages were combined, that introduced some additional efficiencies when both of them were considered together. And so because the model was run that way, the cost savings needed to be calculated in the same manner as well.
So then we can infer that if it was calculated in isolation, then we would potentially see lesser cost savings than combined, perhaps.
I don't know that the model was run to exactly specify that.
Okay. Okay, page 4 of your testimony. Okay. Was there an analysis performed to measure charter required capacity absent the proposed changes in the service standards?
I did not do that. I'm not aware if that was done elsewhere.
And then page 5, lines 7 through 9. Would this network optimization be possible without the proposed changes in service standards? I believe Witness Hagenstein covered it a little already, so maybe redundant.
Yeah, I believe.
Just from your perspective.
Right. I'm sure, like Witness Hagenstein said, there may be some opportunities, but not nearly to the extent that we see in this proposal.
That is all from me. Thank you, Ms. Kim, for answering my questions today.
Thank you, Ms. Ye and Ms. Kim. We have now called upon all the persons that registered to question Witness Kim. If there are additional questions for Ms. Kim, please request to question her using the Q&A box now. Or seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Kim. We will now move on to the next witness, Mr. Thomas Foti, who will be testifying on the trends on the lightweight package market, how the proposed service standard changes may impact customer satisfaction, as well as the market research conducted to estimate the potential volume and contribution impact of the proposed service standard changes. The questioners registered to question Mr. Foti are Mr. Philip Tabita, Samuel Koroma, and Nina Ye. Mr. Foti, if you could please unmute yourself. And if you have any introductory remarks.
Yeah. No, I have no introductory remarks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Tabita, can you please unmute yourself?
Yes. Mr. Foti, I had a couple of questions, mainly about volume and growth. In April and May, we saw some gross drop in competitive packages. I don't know what product those drops occurred in. Can you tell me whether or not you've seen any downturn in first-class package growth in April or May?
You know, I can talk in general terms. I mean, certainly some of this is sensitive data, but certainly we've seen we experienced significant growth last year at this time because of the pandemic, and those growths were you know, in the high double digits growth rates. As you start to compare this year's volumes to those high middle of pandemic time periods, we do see we don't see the growth rates that we saw last year. In some instances, we are seeing some declines.
And in terms of the methods being used by scripts companies, RX companies shipping prescriptions, there seems to be some heavy volumes within the same three-digit zip. Do you see whether the change that people are making, like CVS and Walgreens and other people making deliveries from stores, same-day deliveries, not using the postal service, do you see any impact by the changes in which prescriptions are delivered that's going to affect that volume?
No, I mean, certainly. So the concept of ship from store and delivery, we see that quite a bit in today's world. Certainly, that is not the volume that's being impacted by this change. Those within the existing three-digit zips, but you'll continue to see certainly those pharmacies continue to look for ways to get their products to their patients or to their customers as quickly and efficiently as possible.
In terms of the larger companies that are shipping prescriptions, do you see them mailing regionally, or are some of them mailing cross-country?
I think there's a mix. Some do more centralized, and others do regional. I think in order to meet the demands of some customers, you are seeing a more decentralized approach within that healthcare space, as well as all the industry. I mean, let's face it, there are fulfillment centers popping up everywhere in the country as a way to bring the product closer to the ultimate user of those products, whether it be prescription or others.
And I think the testimony is clear, but I had a little question because it seems somewhat counterintuitive. So you're expanding the second-day reach by a couple hundred miles, and yet the volume impact is only 4%. Is that correct?
And Steve's probably best to address that, but that's that volume that falls into that geographic mileage category that would currently receive 3 days that would now get 2 days, 2-day service standard. So it's not all 2-day volume, or not all 3-day volume. It's just that portion of existing volume that gets a day earlier.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you. Our next questioner on behalf of the Commission's PR staff is Samuel Karoma. Mr. Karoma, could you please unmute yourself?
Thank you very much. Good morning, Tom. Your testimony seemed to focus in part on the FCPS Transit Commitment Survey. And it appears as if that survey was more reliant on the supply side, meaning the bigger pharmaceutical companies, the suppliers. Was there any consideration given on the demand side, given the questioning that most folks, normal folks who receive their medications and medical supplies, was any consideration given on the demand side?
Essentially, you're correct. We focused on the shipper side, so the business or entity that is shipping the product. We felt like that was they're reflective of the needs of their buyers and their consumers. So we felt like that was the appropriate way to address this situation.
On page 5, line 7 of your testimony, you also focus exclusively on what the Postal Service expectation has been over time. You said, we expect reliability will continue to be a key driver of satisfaction. Not what you said there, a key, not the key. So, given the other research results that showed a very minute difference between reliability and speed of delivery, will the Postal Service file another N case if speed of delivery overcomes reliability as the key driver?
I guess I'm not prepared to address that, answer that. I mean, but I think we got to recognize this marketplace is very dynamic, and all entities that participate in this shipping space need to be flexible and need to understand where the market is going and need to make adjustments. So we will continue to do that as an organization and make sure we have relevant products and services that can compete well in this space.
No further questions for this witness.
Thank you, Mr. Karoma.
Thank you.
The next questioner on the queue is Nina Ye.
Good afternoon, Mr. Foti. My first question, if you could refer to page 2 on your testimony, lines 6 through 10. You state that the changes to the service standards will affect first-class package service volumes as follows. Approximately 32% of FCPS volumes, predominantly in higher shipping zone, will shift to 3-day service, from 3-day service to 4 to 5-day service, and 64% of the volume will not experience any change. Do you expect these percentage changes to stay the same for future years?
I guess the percentages within the 2, 3, 4, and 5-day categories, is that what you're referring to?
Correct.
I anticipate, let me address it this way. The way the market has progressed, and certainly recently within the recent 2 or 3 years, is that you see more and more of that volume, as I mentioned to an earlier question, you see more and more of that volume moving closer to the end consumer. So moving shorter distances. The expectation is that is where the market goes. Now, whether or not, so we anticipate those volumes to continue to be very competitive in that market space, and for those volumes to continue to grow. That doesn't mean we wouldn't necessarily maintain that same growth level in these outer zones based upon how we compare with our competitors' services. And I do think that we are competitive against our competitors in those longer distances also. So, I mean, realistically, it's hard to make a judgment whether these percentages will change or not. But as I mentioned before, we will actively monitor this and understand how customers are changing and shippers' behaviors are changing. Okay.
And now will you refer to page 5 of your testimony, lines 2 through 6? Sammy Karoma also mentioned this particular subject. Are the drivers of satisfaction listed in the order, in any particular order of importance to the surveyed shippers?
Yes, that is the order. That is the order that they are in order of importance, the way they are listed there.
Okay. Next, if you could refer to page 8 of your testimony, lines 3 to 5.
Okay.
Here, will you please compare the current service standards between priority mail and first class package services?
Yeah, you know, Steve Hagenstein is probably the one that's best to address it. I can address it in a general way.
Right.
Those services, priority mail is a 2 to 3 day service. First class mail also currently has a 2 to 3 day service. I'm sorry, priority mail is a 1 to 3 day service actually, and first class package services has a 2 to 3 day services. And there are specific parameters that Steve or somebody from our operations group is probably best to address.
Okay, so your statement, if FCPS retail customer seeks a faster delivery time, they have the option of choosing our priority mail product as a readily substitute at the retail locations under the new proposal. So I just would like to confirm that with that, in the current situation, they wouldn't need to consider priority mail because it's a more expensive shipping product. They can just stick with FCPS. Would that be a fair statement?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I mean, there are differences in the products. So beyond just service, and the value proposition for priority mail with other attributes like insurance and the like are other reasons why customers may choose priority mail and get other benefits for that. So it's not just one sole reason, price being or service. I mean, it's the total attributes of the products.
Okay, I can appreciate that the first class mail is first class package service is sealed against inspection, but I'm curious from if there were any kind of markets research done where somehow you can figure out what is the content being mailed with it using first class package service versus the under £1 rate for priority mail, or is there just not possible to do such a research?
Yeah, there's nothing to my knowledge that gets into the contents necessarily of those two categories.
For example, if let's say the shippers that uses first class package services, I would assume like the ones that use Marketplace, those would probably be more consumer goods versus, I don't know if they would use priority mail for those lighter weight pieces, but those questions were not addressed in your survey, right? In the survey.
Correct. Correct.
Thank you. That is all for me. Thank you for answering my questions today.
Thank you, Nina.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Ms. Ye, and thank you, Mr. Foti. That's the final questioner on the registrant list for Mr. Foti. We'll give it a minute to see if we have any follow-up questions for Mr. Foti. We do actually have a follow-up question for Michelle Kim. So if there are no further follow-ups for Mr. Foti at this time, we will turn back to witness Michelle Kim, and we'll let the questioner Yana Slovinska on behalf of commission staff have a moment to question Michelle Kim.
Thank you. Ms. Kim, I was wondering if you could take us through the process of any contract modifications that will be necessary from restructured network. So as I see it, there will be trips that will have different routings and different mileages. There will be trips that will be eliminated, and there will be trips that might be newly added. For the trips that will be modified in terms of routings and mileages, the cost was saving in the calculation is determined on the basis of FY20 rate per mile, right?
Yes, FY20 was used as the baseline cost.
Right. But the difference in the network that we are modeling here is that the transportation time will have time for extra stops or volume transfers, and that probably will incur cost for the contracted driver's time, I believe. Is that reflected in those savings? Are savings diminished by that, or?
So I think your audio was breaking up a little, but if you could repeat the question, maybe.
Yes. So the trip that currently has miles and certain routing costs, the cost is determined based on the rate per mile in fiscal year 20. This trip will be rerouted in the new network. The change will not only stem from new mileage and different routing, the change will also stem from the time that will be added to the trip for transferring volume through STC or for the ability to delay dispatch. All that flexibility that comes with the reduced service standards that probably costs for contracted drivers' time. Is that reflected in the savings? And whether it is or not, how will that process go when contracts are modified?
Yes, so the additional flexibility in routing through SDCs, that was all included in witness Hagenstein's model. And so his model projected the change in capacity in the surface network. And so we were able to convert that into a change in cost using the cost to capacity variabilities, which have been estimated for decades. And so we found those to be a reliable projection of what the cost savings would be. As for the exact implementation and the contract modifications, that is beyond the scope of my testimony. So I would not be prepared to discuss the actual contract modifications.
Okay, but I believe that transit times were determined based on same average speed. And so combining only speed and distance does not amount to the same transportation time as distance and speed and volume transfers or delayed dispatches, right? The time is greater in the second case. And I am asking if that will be a cost increase.
I'm not sure I'm following the question exactly, but if it's related to the modeling and the assumptions that went into the model, then probably witness Hagenstein would be more equipped to discuss those.
Okay, thank you. I would also like to see for the baseline network excluded certain transportation on the basis of being out of scope. Would you know approximately how much the network costs to these account for this transportation?
I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of the question. I think your audio was cutting out again. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. So some transportation was excluded from modeling because it was determined to be outside of the scope. Can you hear me?
I'm sorry, I only got the end again.
The modeling excluded certain transportation on the basis of being outside the scope. Yes. Would you know approximate percentage of costs that this transportation represents for FY20 or any year approximately?
So I think the transportation that would be outside of scope of this case would be more of the local transportation. And I don't have those figures in front of me right this minute, but that would be, I think, what would be outside the scope of this case.
Okay. Okay. I asked this Mr. Hagenstein, and he referred me to you. Would you be able to comment on the difference between 12% of costs being incurred in inter-PDC transportation, but only 1% of mileages? Would you be able to comment on that difference? Explain maybe.
I think that would go back to how the model characterized those mileages. So I think Witness Hagenstein's response probably covered that as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I would be prepared to discuss.
Okay. Thank you. One more question though. When the cost effectiveness was determined for diverted volumes and the surface versus air transportation, the savings for air volume do take into account weight or cubic feet, depending on the carrier. Was weight included in evaluating surface cost, package weight, and maybe cubic feet as well?
Yes, I think for the surface costs, I think cubic feet would have been the primary consideration. The cubic foot miles is what we typically use for to measure the capacity of the service network, and so that's how much space it takes up on the truck and how far it's going, and so cubic feet would have been the indicator there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And would you be able to tell me how the costs that Postal Service incurs for any late trips, how is that determined? When trip has to be canceled or when the trip is delayed? How is the cost determined?
So for extra trips, exceptional transportation, that was not included in the savings for this model, just because due to the nature of those trips, they're unpredictable because they do happen on kind of an emergency basis. And so those are not included because they couldn't be modeled reliably.
Mm-hmm. But emergency trips were included. Are those easier to predict?
Yeah, so emergency, despite the name, emergency contracts typically behave more like regular transportation. They just happen to be a shorter time window or time for the contract. And so those were included, yes, if it's called emergency contracts.
Okay. Thank you very much. These are all my questions.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Witness Kim before we move on to the final Postal Service witness? If so, please type in the Q&A box below. Hearing none, we're going to move on to the final Postal Service witness, Ms. Sharon Owens, the institutional witness, to provide information not provided by other witnesses. And Ms. Owens, you may be getting a question or two from the PR team. Mr. Karoma, do you have any questions for Ms. Owens?
No question for this witness at this time.
Does anybody else have any questions for Sharon Owens? Hearing none, I'm going to turn it over to Lauren.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you to all of our witnesses and participants in today's technical conference for contributing to a robust discussion. We're checking the Q&A just to see if anyone else, Ms. Owens, you muted yourself, but it's okay. I don't believe there are any questions for you. With that, we'll just brief procedural notes. The notices of intervention in this case are due on July 1st, which falls this Thursday. Also note that statements of position are due August 9th. Thank you very much again for your robust participation in this technical conference. Wish you well and have a great day. You can stop the stream. PRC, Stephen Perry and Lee Martin. Thank you very much.
Stream has been shut down.